In this video, I'm going to be going over a project that I shot last summer that to date is one of my favorites. It consisted of me following 3 bat biologists around for 3 nights in a row in northern British Columbia as they gathered genetic information as well as other data on bats in the area. You can check out the full video at the link in the description, and I'm just going to be going through a few points that I'd like to talk about, things that I learned during the shoot that hopefully you can take with you if you find yourself in a similar scenario on one of your projects. So the first point that I want to talk about before I get into any specific part of the video is how important it was on this shoot to understand the work that the biologists were doing ahead of time. So this just consisted of me asking a lot of questions and getting as prepared as I can. This will come up in almost every other thing that I talk about, so it's really crucial that you kind of have an understanding of the work that you're filming, as it allows you to get into position for shots, it allows you to stay out of the way of the people that you're filming, and it also allows you to kind of use your time wisely. So the first shot that I want to talk about, and that builds on that first tip of understanding the work that you're filming, is this opening shot, which consists of a time lapse of the biologists as they went back and forth from station to station at one of the sites. I really like this time lapse because, again, I knew where all of their stations were going to be in this area, and I knew that they were going to be going kind of along this path and this bridge here that was on the far side of this little pond. So I thought that would be a cool place to set this time lapse up, where you're getting all of their kind of light trails from headlamps as they move back and forth, as well as all the reflections in the water as they move back and forth. And it is just a very visually interesting scene, and it kind of makes the viewer think a little bit about what's going on. Hopefully it's kind of a little on the abstract side, but you can kind of figure it out. So the next thing I want to talk about is lighting that I used for this shoot, or rather the lack of lighting. All of the nighttime scenes were lit exclusively by the biologist headlamps, and then for some of the shots where they were doing their work studying the bats at the table that they had set up, there was this kind of camp lantern that you can see in the background of this shot, and that would just give kind of a nice rim light to them as they were sitting there doing their work. So that was kind of it. Yeah, just this light for some of them, and then headlamps for a large portion of the shots. So one key thing for this is that some headlamps will flicker quite bad, and it's very noticeable when you're filming. So ahead of time, I like to just test out all of the headlamps that everyone has with them, and I do usually carry 1 or 2 extras with me that I know don't flicker, so that if someone does have one, I can just swap it out for the shoot, give them the one that doesn't flicker, and then just hand them their actual headlamp back once we're done. So that's something to keep in mind if you're going to be filming anyone with headlamps. Test for flickering before you get into the shoot, otherwise you'll have to deal with it in post, which is possible, but it's nice when you can avoid it. So another thing that was really key on this shoot that helped me is kind of embracing a certain level of informed randomness, I would say. And what I mean by that is there were a few shots that I specifically wanted to get, like this one up here. I knew there was a path that the biologists would be walking back and forth on a lot to get from one station to the next. And I knew I wanted a shot of one of the biologists silhouetted from behind from the headlamp of the other biologist. So knowing that they were going to be walking this path multiple times, I was able to get into position ahead of time, wait for them to come over this little hill, and then get that shot of the one in front backlit by the one behind. Where does the informed randomness come into that? Well, the randomness comes in this case from the headlamps being the only source of light. So I kind of had to rely on me being in the right position, but also that the headlamps were going to be pointing in the right direction for me to get that nice silhouette that I was looking for. Luckily it turned out, but you also have to kind of embrace the fact that it might not be exactly what you pictured, depending on where the people with the headlamps are going to be looking. Luckily, they're usually looking at either where they're walking or what they're working on with their hands, and you can kind of use information like that to your advantage. So there's a certain level of just understanding the work, and there's a certain level of recognizing that there's going to be a bit of randomness coming from the fact that it's just headlamps. And another shot that I want to use to illustrate this is I knew that I wanted a shot of a bat in one of the nets that they were using to capture the bats, and I wanted that bat to be kind of silhouetted from behind as the biologist walked up to it and took it out of the net. Again, just knowing where the nets were located, knowing that they were going to be checking them quite frequently so that the bats weren't in the nets for too long, and knowing exactly where I needed to be in relation to where they were going to be helped me get this shot, and it's one of my favorite ones in the video. So again, just embracing that bit of randomness, but also knowing like the biologist is going to be looking at the bat when they come to the net. So as long as I'm framed up, focused, and ready for that, then it shouldn't be a problem to get that shot, and it turned out so you can see that here. And I'll talk a little bit about the gear that I use for this, specifically the cameras. So Sony A7S III was the main camera used on this shoot. Kept it at the 12,800 base ISO pretty much the whole time, and paired it with a 35mm G Master lens. Kept that wide open at 1.4 pretty much the whole time to let as much light into the sensor as possible. The headlamps were actually quite bright, and I did have to actually use an ND filter for a couple shots to get the proper exposure, but for the most part there was no ND on the camera at all due to it being so dark. For the time lapse at the start that I mentioned was a A7 III, and I just left that on the interval setting for quite a while to get that time lapse that turned into the opening shot. Yeah, the A7S III was like the perfect camera for this. Everything was shot handheld, had to be able to move around quite quickly to follow the biologist, get into the positions that I needed to, and also shoot in quite a small amount of light for a lot of the shoot. So yeah, it was the perfect setup for that, and I'll probably be doing a whole video on that camera at some point because it's served me quite well over the past few years, and I think it's, even though it's a little old at this point, it's really great. So look out for that one. That's it for this one. Hopefully you learned a little bit about filming at night in very low light conditions with not a lot of external light sources. Hopefully you can take something into the next shoot that you have. If you have any more tips and tricks for shooting at night that I didn't cover here, or you have more questions about this specific shoot that I was on, just drop a comment down below and I'll get back to you. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
Hour till no, we got a half hour probably. I guess we determined our you just turn it on and you just have to kind of hold it. It's ready.